What's cracking, yo? Welcome back to Boo TV. Appreciate you for stopping in. Like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell, stay notified, and let's get into the topic for today. What up, y'all? Back with another reaction video in the world of Kobe Bryant, who is my favorite basketball player of all time, one of my heroes, and a legend that will live forever. Rest in peace, Black Mamba. I knew these videos existed, and I wanted to one day react to the Clayton Crowley's The Legend of Kobe Bryant. But then subscriber Dimitri Morkis dropped a comment in our Bill Walton video. Go check that out if you haven't seen it yet. And he was like, yo, really happy you reacted to this particular video, though, as Clayton is on a roll with this new Legend series of his. He only drops new videos every few months or so, but when he did a part 2 video on the Legend Kobe Bryant, I thought about you. I appreciate you thinking about me. The second installment was uploaded recently, so if you have not seen it, here's a link to the video. This is not an official request, but from one fan to another, I think it is some of the best content Clayton has put out. Thanks for the reaction. Yo, thank you for the recommendation. And I know you said this isn't an official request, but because it's something that I did want to do, I just didn't know what I was going to do it, and you brought it up, we're calling this an official request, and we're going to do it now and get into The Legend of Kobe Bryant, Part 1. Go check out our Kobe Bryant playlist. Tons of Kobe content, MJ content, Bird content, and their perspective playlists or the reaction video playlist to see a collection of all the reaction videos for all the players, all right? Appreciate you guys. Let's get into this Kobe stuff.
Legends. The players that are remembered long after their playing days end, and indeed long after they too pass. The players that live on in mythology and reverence, that have influenced the game we see today. They are players who have set records, won championships, and captured our attention, etching their legacies into the foundations of this game. A legend is special, not simply because their talent set them apart, but because their stories transcend the individual. In fact, to me, that is what a legend is. A remarkable player who tells a story that enthralls us. So today, I'd like to talk about the legend of Kobe Bryant. The Black Mamba, Kobe Bean Bryant. Where do you start with one of the most polarizing, recognizable, famous basketball players of all time, who happens also to be one of its greatest? As enigmatic an athlete or person of interest as you are likely to find in the last 50 years of American pop culture. He was often a person that was difficult to describe, empathize with, or relate to. As his former teammate Brian Shaw said, Kobe sometimes isolated himself in his relentless pursuit to be the best who ever played the game. Bryant wore nearly every mask that can be worn. A winner, a loser, competitive, petty, selfish, unshakable, prodigy, flameout, idol, and pariah. Kobe spent every minute of his 20-year professional career with the Los Angeles Lakers, forging a legend that is one of the most interesting in contemporary sports. As he was in most aspects, Kobe Bryant's upbringing was atypical. He spent his formative years from ages 6 to 13 in Italy, where his father, Joe Jellybean Bryant, played professionally after a 5-year stint in the NBA. There, Kobe became fluent in Italian as well as Spanish, acclimatized himself to Italian culture, and began falling in love with the game of basketball. When he did return to America with his family to Philadelphia at 13 years old, Bryant was faced with the same terrifying challenge that all teenage Americans must face: starting high school. But unlike most American teenagers, Bryant hadn't grown up in America. He had left his closest friends a continent away and had become so accustomed to the Italian language that he found it awkward to transition back to English, perplexed by American slang. He found it difficult to make friends, and so instead of going to parties, Kobe spent his weekends in the gym, honing his skills as a basketball player. He made the varsity roster as a freshman, but did more watching than playing as the Lower Merion Aces went 4-20 on the season. Still, his love of the game and confidence in his ability never wavered. He had the temperament of an obsessive, and in the face of the haunting loneliness of pubescent isolation, Kobe Bryant, like millions of other kids just like him, found solace in an empty gym watching leather go through nylon. When he returned for his sophomore season, Kobe Bryant was ready. That freshman team had gone 4-20. Over the next 3 years, Kobe led the Aces to a 77-13 record. By his senior year, Kobe Bryant was the #1 high school prospect in the nation. He took home a trove of National Player of the Year awards after passing Wilt Chamberlain to become Philadelphia's all-time high school leading scorer and leading the Aces to their first state championship in over 50 years. Unlike other high school standouts from years prior, though, Kobe's senior year was not marked by a burning curiosity as to where he would go to college. The basketball world wondered if he would go to college. The year prior, in the 1995 NBA draft, Kevin Garnett had declared his intention to forego college and make himself eligible to be drafted directly out of high school. And with the 5th overall pick, the Minnesota Timberwolves made Kevin Garnett the first basketball player in 20 years to be drafted right out of high school. The decision opened the floodgates. Obviously, as the top prospect in the nation, virtually every college in the country was vying for Bryant's commitment. But all of a sudden, there was the possibility that this 17-year-old kid could just say, "Forget it. I'm ready. This is my time. I'm going pro." At a press conference in 1996, wearing some painfully 90s sunglasses atop his bald head, the Phenom did just that.
No, I have decided to skip college and take my talent to the NBA.
In the 1996 NBA draft, the Los Angeles Lakers were looking to free up cap space in order to land the most physically dominant player basketball had seen since Wilt Chamberlain, one Shaquille O'Neal. After 4 successful seasons with the Orlando Magic, Shaq wanted a new team in a bigger market. In order to free up the space needed to sign O'Neal, the Lakers made a draft day trade with the Charlotte Hornets, sending them center Vlade Divac and his behemoth contract in exchange for the 13th overall pick. Having impressed Lakers GM Jerry West during a pre-draft workout with that 13th pick, Kobe Bryant became the first guard ever drafted from high school into the NBA and just the 6th player to ever get drafted straight out of high school. He was so young at the time, just 17 years old, that his parents had to co-sign his rookie contract. About 3 weeks later, on July 18th, 1996, the Lakers signed Shaquille O'Neal, now possessing everything they would need to create what would be one of the defining basketball dynasties of the 21st century. In hindsight, of course, there aren't 12 players in NBA history that would be taken ahead of Kobe Bryant. But it was a good thing that the draft shook out the way that it did. Kobe landed on the right team without the expectations to immediately make an impact that a #1 pick would carry. He impressed in the Summer League, and when he debuted in the NBA on November 2nd, 1996, he was the second youngest NBA player in history at just 18 years and 72 days old. Throughout that first year, Kobe acclimated to the professional ranks and the culture and pressure that surrounds a team with championship aspirations. He came off of the bench for most of the year, spending most of his time dazzling crowds with his athleticism, even winning that year's dunk contest. Despite his growing popularity as a rising star on the most famous franchise in professional basketball, though, he was kept on a pretty short leash that first season, averaging just 15 minutes a game and earning a spot on the league's all-rookie second team. He had held his own, and had proven wrong everyone who had doubted his ability to produce and compete in the NBA straight out of high school. But for the most part, in the big picture, Bryant's rookie season was kind of unremarkable. At least, it was. Until the very last game of the Lakers season. In the playoffs, the Lakers met the Utah Jazz in the second round. After 4 games, the Jazz had the Lakers on the ropes with a 3-1 series lead. In Game 5, a do-or-die game for the Lakers, in Utah, LA found themselves shorthanded after Byron Scott missed the game with an injury, Robert Horry was ejected for fighting.
I also like he made a comment not too long ago saying that in his rookie year, Kobe was pretty much kept on a short leash. which is true. He was oozing with talent. When he would get minutes, he would make the best of them and really produce. But back in that day, they did not prioritize. The NBA it's a very different culture, man. They didn't care about young kids with talent coming out of high school. Hey, most of the time you're going to the bench, and you're gonna have to wait till your time comes and work in the gym and work in practice till we feel like you're ready. We're just not gonna throw you out there and have you learn the game and give you big minutes, especially when you got Shaquille O'Neal, especially when you got Eddie Jones, especially when you got Nick Van Exel. I don't know if Nick was on the team at this time. I don't know if he came the season after. But they had a championship contending team already with players that have been in for years and veterans. So they didn't give two shits about Kobe from that perspective, regardless of how hungry he was, regardless of how talented he was, regardless of how many times he used to kick people's ass in practice. That was just a very different league now. That now these young players get playing time. Back in the day, they didn't prioritize them so much. And even after Kobe established himself, during his tenure with Shaq, he was largely still kept on a leash because of Shaq's dominance and him being the focal point of the offense most nights.
And Shaquille O'Neal fouled out in the fourth quarter. Without their best player, in a win-or-go-home scenario in an increasingly close game, 18-year-old rookie Kobe Bryant put on his cape. Or at least, he tried to. He scored a team-high 9 points in the fourth, setting up a potential game-winning shot that he airballed. For all his life, Kobe had dreamed of being the guy to take the big shots. In overtime, he found himself in a nightmare. He went on to airball 3 three-pointers in the period, 2 of which came in the last minute and would have tied the game. The Lakers' season ended in a 98-93 overtime loss, with Kobe registering 11 points on a putrid 4 of 14 shooting split. In the most important game of the season, with an opportunity that rarely presents itself to rookies, Kobe Bryant didn't just miss one important shot. He airballed 4 of the biggest shots of the game.
Yep.
All of a sudden, those doubters that he'd silenced in the regular season had reason to chirp. He's too immature. He needed to go to college. He needs an ego check. But at the same time, how about the balls on the kid? To come into the game as an 18-year-old rookie and never stop shooting, even when you're throwing up bricks? Sure, they lost, and he had something to do with it. But still, it takes confidence. Which is exactly...
Kobe will always tell you, you cannot be afraid of failure or you have already defeated yourself. He was never afraid to fail. He was willing to take the consequences for his actions. He'll be the first to tell you.
The kind of thing that makes Kobe Bryant so objectively great and still so bitterly polarizing. We'll dive more into his confidence and mindset later, but this game exists as a surreally perfect foreshadowing of the Kobe Bryant experience.
It does.
For everything that he did that reaffirmed his
Game
greatness
winner.
to his supporters, the same things would be pointed to by his detractors as evidence of his flaws. On the one hand, Kobe is wired like few others. He believes in himself above all else. He'll miss some game winners, maybe even shoot his team out of some games, but he'll make those game winners too. On the other hand, that confidence and self-determination can come at the detriment to the team. Over the next few years, Kobe's responsibilities steadily increased as he continued to sharpen his skills. In his second year, he was runner-up for the 6th Man of the Year award and became the youngest All-Star starter in history thanks to the league's fan voting. And in his third year, he assumed the role of the team's full-time starting shooting guard, starting all 50 games of the lockout-shortened 1999 season, averaged nearly 20 points a game, and was a third-team All-NBA selection. All the while, Kobe's improvement as an individual had a nearly linear relationship with the team's performance. Of course, at this time, Shaquille O'Neal was still the best player on the Lakers, and arguably the best player in the sport. But Kobe had quickly become one of the premier perimeter players in the world, giving the Lakers a 1-2 center guard combo that hadn't been seen since the days of Kareem and Magic Johnson. Finally, before the 1999-2000 NBA season, the final piece fell into place. The Lakers employed the talents of the man who would retire with more championship rings than any other coach in major North American sports. The Zen Master, Phil Jackson. As his nickname implies, Jackson believed in a mindful, inclusive, holistic style of coaching, minimizing egos, encouraging cooperation, and often employing unorthodox methods to promote team synergy. The same principles he had used to guide Michael Jordan and the Chicago Bulls to 6 championships in 8 years. Armed with the best center in the league, one of the brightest new stars in the sport, and one of the most prolific coaches in NBA history, the new-look Lakers ripped off a 3-year stretch that stands among the best a basketball team has ever enjoyed. The Lakers three-peated, winning the 2000, 2001, and 2002 championships, and it's important to point out again that those 3 championship teams belonged to Shaq. They were his teams, and he was the Finals MVP in each championship series. I say that because I know that this is Kobe's story, and it wouldn't be right to frame those titles as just his. But that's not to say that he didn't leave his mark on each championship, or that he wasn't vital to their success. Their first championship was perhaps their hardest. In the finals, Shaq was unstoppable. But true to form, Kobe made a mark in a truly memorable way. He had injured his ankle in Game 2, which had forced him to miss the rest of that game and all of Game 3. He returned in Game 4, tentatively easing himself into the action with a slow 6-point first half. But as the game progressed, an opportunity presented itself. In an exceptionally close game throughout, he began heating up in the second half, keeping pace and finding his rhythm as the game came down to the wire and went into overtime. And there, in OT, after Shaq fouled out, Kobe Bryant put on the cape. Remember, this was a pivotal Game 4. Win and the Lakers go up 3-1. Lose and the finals would be tied at 2-2. Without the best player in the league, Bryant submitted a heroic performance, nailing 4 of his 5 shots in the overtime period, with none more important than a tip-in off a missed shot with just 15 seconds remaining, giving the Lakers a 3-point lead. In total, Kobe scored 22 of his 28 points in the second half and overtime. He had come through on the biggest stage, had proven that he was the guy with the guts to take big shots, and the talent to make them. A far cry from air balls in Utah. After the game and the subsequent championship, a comparison that had once sounded outlandish no longer seemed so far-fetched. That comparison, of course, is of Kobe Bryant and Michael Jordan. It had started years earlier, almost from the moment that Bryant stepped onto an NBA court for the very first time. Remember, Bryant became the Lakers' starting shooting guard the year after Jordan retired from the Bulls. Without the most popular basketball player ever, fans and journalists searched for the player that would fill that gargantuan power vacuum. For years, the title of the next Jordan would be applied to dozens of young players. Players like Grant Hill, Allen Iverson, LeBron James, Vince Carter, Ray Allen, and Jerry Stackhouse all at one point or another had their talents, tendencies, and attitudes compared to number 23. All to varying degrees of accuracy and success. But none of them captured the real essence of Michael Jordan the way that Kobe Bryant did.
I'd like to also add, definitely true about what he said about the 3 championship teams. Shaq was just on another level and dominant, and it didn't mean that Kobe didn't have. Kobe held his own. I tell you, that first championship, there was a significant gap between where Shaq was a player, where Shaq was as a player, and where Kobe was as a player. But after that first championship, going into the 2000-2001 season and on, that gap was not so big anymore. And Kobe really carried the Lakers in a lot of those playoff series and carried his own weight and played a substantial and critical role in those championships. And he wasn't holding on to Shaq's coattails. They both carried those Los Angeles Laker teams for those last 2 championships in a three-peat. But that first one was not even an argument. Shaq carried them, that first one. But those next 2, it was a 1 and 1A thing. They both did their work. especially in those Western Conference series leading up to the finals. Kobe had some huge series and games, as did Shaq. All right, let's keep it moving.
Sure, they played the same position and were roughly the same height and build, but their similarities go far beyond their physical traits. The two shared a quality that few, if any, players have been able to emulate in the 20-plus years since the GOAT retired. Their drive. Michael Jordan was a famously competitive individual who was never outworked, who never lost a contest of who wants it more. He was willing to do anything to win, and believed that only by applying the highest standard of excellence to himself and his teammates was it possible to achieve his goals. Could that sound any more like Kobe Bryant? Kobe's confidence, even from his rookie year in the league, was rooted in the fact that he had spent the time and done the work that no one else had. He was addicted to studying film, experimenting with, tweaking, and adopting new moves. He loved basketball as much as nearly anything else in his life, and tirelessly dedicated himself to becoming the best player that he could possibly be. Nearly every player, nearly every person whose career path intersected his has a Kobe Bryant working out like a crazy person story. And I haven't even mentioned the fact that Kobe Bryant had an array of talents and moves that looked eerily similar to Mike's. One of Kobe's first loves was the pull-up jumper, a move that gave him mastery of the mid-range, going back to his high school days. In those younger years, he had world-class athleticism, a lightning-quick first step, and delivered some of the famous...
I want to add to what he just said, right? I'm glad he said that, because I hear a lot of people say, oh, Kobe didn't develop his mid-range game till later in his career. That is not true. Kobe came into the league using fadeaways and mid-range jumpers. He just wasn't slashing to the hole and dunking and being solely reliant on his athleticism when he came in at a young age. His offensive game was pretty polished, and he had an array of moves from all over the court at a young age. He didn't start developing it later, like a lot of players do. That was not Kobe Bean's story. That is a myth.
Dunks and posters to ever be printed. His jab step was absolutely lethal, and he developed moves and combinations in conjunction with it that always kept the defense guessing. He was a defensive pest as a youth and was a perennial defensive team selection. He was a complete basketball player with very few holes in his game. And maybe most importantly, Kobe had a supernatural gift of locking into and channeling the moment, never allowing himself to be too far removed from it. He lived for the big moments, relished the chances when the raucous roar of the crowd would fall on his deaf ears as his total concentration fixed into place on the task at hand. Now, who does that sound like? I have an entire video dedicated to the 2001 Lakers and how great they were in the playoffs, because they were great. In fact, it might well be the best postseason an NBA team has ever had. The combination of Kobe and Shaq was apocryphal for other teams. Both players had always known that on any given night, one of them could go off for 40. But the power of that team came from the realization that when one got hot, it wasn't an invitation for the other to take the back seat. They averaged nearly 60 points combined in the playoffs. They went 15-1 through the playoffs, as close to a clean sweep as any team has ever gotten. They faced stiff competition, becoming just the second team in history to defeat 4 straight 50-win teams, and posted the highest net rating of any playoff team ever.
I keep telling people, I was like, dude, the teams the Lakers were facing in those playoff series, each of those teams were very well championship contenders. And you had to play these guys in the first, second, third round, or second and third round before you even get to the finals. So I don't want to hear about the teams that they fought in the finals from the Eastern Conference. That juggernaut Western Conference, those teams they had to face, very well might have been championship series. And Kobe has more victories, more playoff victories against 50-win teams than any player in the history of the league. Keep that in mind.
And unlike the previous year, Kobe's contributions in the finals were almost just as impressive as his gargantuan teammates. His numbers reflected his newfound stature in the league as perhaps the sport's best all-around player. and the totality of his contributions just might be the best that a sidekick has ever produced in basketball history. And for the 2002 championship, Kobe played the role of assassin. He was a monster in the finals, accounting for 25% of the team's points, and was at his absolute best in the fourth quarters. As I say in the 01 Lakers video, Kobe never resigned to be Robin. Instead, he was the Batman to Shaq's Superman.
There you go.
I mean, even in 03, when the Lakers had an underwhelming regular season and saw their title run end at the hand of the Spurs in the second round, Kobe emerged as a legit MVP candidate. It was the year he arrived as an authentic every night scorer and saw him begin to post the outlandish numbers that we would come to expect from him. He set the NBA record for most threes in a game against Seattle. He had a 9-game stretch of 40 or more points. He averaged 40 points a game for the entire month of February and finished the season third in MVP voting. There's a reason it's so rare to three-peat. There's a reason that there's only one instance of a team winning 4 or more championships in a row. It's fucking hard. You're playing every game of basketball possible, from September or October until June, year after year, getting every team's best shot at you. Not to mention the attention and pressure that comes with being such a talented team, combined with the fact that if you are a team that is good enough to win so many championships, odds are you have some egos and some characters in the locker room. Those Lakers did something that has not been done in the nearly 2 decades since. Was it Shaq's team? Yes. Would those Lakers have won 3 championships without Kobe Bean Bryant?
Oh.
No chance.
Hell no.
And speaking of egos, I've yet to mention the facet of those Lakers that is near.
Pause. I'm glad he said that because I hear other players be like, if I had Shaq, I would have won 3 straight championships too. Pump the brakes. Pump the brakes. That it is very hard to do, and the fact that you're not as good as Kobe, and it took Shaq and Kobe to do it, and they had some close calls and some luck involved to be able to pull that three-peat. I don't think that's an accurate statement. Anybody could have won with Shaq. No. Sorry.
Nearly as memorable as their talent. The power struggle between Shaq and Kobe. It is a famous beef, and the genesis of the beef, as far as I can tell, goes back to the 01 Lakers, when Shaq came into camp out of shape after just having had his best season ever, while Kobe grinded away in the gym all summer. Kobe wanted Shaq to work as hard as he did, and Shaq wanted Kobe to back off and respect the fact that the Lakers belonged to him. Of course, then you get snide attacks through the media, offhand comments that wound up in tabloids, and a general air of hostility and discomfort plaguing the team to different degrees at different times. Every time they were winning, things were simpatico. But when they lost, fingers got pointed, and everyone had an opinion on who was right, who was wrong, and whose team it should be. It was a Shakespearean conflict. These guys were so talented, and their styles complemented each other so well, but they were wired so differently. At the same time, they were both wired the same in the respect that they were both alpha dogs, which, of course, only caused more friction. And that was their relationship for most of their time together. Begrudging allies who doubled as a world-conquering duo. So after the three-peat, and after they finally fell off the mountain in 03, the question that needed answering was, can these two continue to coexist? Because the only way it seemed worth it for them is because they knew they were great together, and because they were winning championships. But before that question could be answered, before the 2003-2004 NBA season, Kobe Bryant was arrested in Colorado in connection with a sexual assault investigation. The charges were later dropped after the accuser refused to testify, and a civil suit was later settled out of court. Throughout the process, Kobe maintained his innocence and claimed that the relationship had been consensual. I have no interest in telling you what I think, nor am I here to grandstand and lecture you on what you should think, how you should regard Kobe's legacy, or anything like that. Whether the accusations were true or not, Kobe did afterwards become a more vocal advocate for women in women's sports, especially as he became a father to 4 daughters. Think what you want about it, This video is not about this incident, and I do not have a conclusion you should take away.
I'm not getting into the details of the trials, but I will say this. There was a lot of different guys, fluids in her underwear from the night. Several different guys, fluids in her underwear from that night. Well, I'll leave it at that. All right, let's check it out, man.
But it would be wildly irresponsible to talk about the legend of Kobe Bryant and not spend at least some time talking about the facts of an incredibly serious accusation that sullied his reputation and remains, in the most conservative language possible, a controversial point of contention. So,
that year, that's the year they got. He'll get into this. They got Karl Malone and Gary Payton came in the team. Yada yada. The fact that Kobe was dealing with these court issues and still going out and performing at a high level every night, hitting game winners, all this kind of stuff with this whole dark cloud of the trial looming over him, not knowing what was going to happen, not knowing, what was going to happen with his family, with his wife, if he's going to be. I've heard other stories about it was like hell for this guy, just inside his household. Fighting with his wife, this, that, and the third. Then having to go straight to a game, missing practice. I ain't gonna say missing practice, but things like that. And he would just come in to the game and still perform. You never knew some of the stuff was going on that wasn't exploited publicly. His dates and his trial dates and when he had to appear in court, all that stuff was publicly released. But all the other stuff going around with his family, no one really knew that stuff was going on. Kobe opened up about it in an interview before. He said he went home and his wife had threw all his shit out the house and this, that, and the third. And I think that was the game against Orlando Magic, and he went in against T-Mac. And he had a horrible first half of the game, and T-Mac was on fire. Kobe came out in the second half, dropped like over 40 points, and a clutch basket after clutch basket after clutch basket after clutch basket, brought the Lakers back in to win it. It was an amazing game. I'm going to do a video on that game. He had a shoulder sleeve on. And even the first game, he came in, the first game of the season against the Denver Nuggets, so you can imagine the vitriol and the venom in the arena where he was accused, Colorado, right? Accused of, sexually assaulting this woman, and he came in and hit a game winner. The first game in Colorado. And the type of signs and billboards throughout the season that people would have, calling him a rapist, drawing pictures of him in the jail cells and all this other stuff. This is the kind of... Now, would they allow that? They wouldn't allow that today. They would not allow that today in these arenas. And a lot of players couldn't handle that today in these arenas. But this is the type of stuff they were allowing back then. And he was looking at, at the free throw line, in the midst of the game, crowd screaming rapist and this, you're going to jail, this. And he was just ice cold, never complained about it, just went in there snatching people's hearts out on the floor. That is the ultimate level of focus, will, and killer instinct, bro. That does not get mentioned about that campaign, even though they didn't win a championship. All right, I'm going to shut up and let him tell the story. Just wanted to make that out. Just wanted to make those points clear.
So, with all of that having been said, the 2004 Lakers season was a mess. Because they were the team at the time, they'd attracted players who were desperate to win a championship and escape the curse of eternal ringlessness, leading Karl Malone and Gary Payton to don the purple and gold. Kobe was missing games due to court appearances, and Shaq missed 15 games due to injury, while the arrest, the super team roster, and the escalating feud between superstars cast a pall over the entire endeavor. And the feud was at an all-time high. Before the season, Kobe had criticized Shaq in an ESPN interview, questioning his leadership and willingness to sacrifice. As the season progressed, this bitter resentment seemed to grow into what seemed like real hatred for one another. But of course, they found themselves in the finals yet again. Because they were the best 1-2 punch ever. And because this time they got a little lucky. In those 2004 finals, the Lakers, with an absolutely star-studded roster of Hall of Famers and all-time role players, squared up against a Detroit Pistons team that were 6-1 underdogs. The Pistons were a team of misfit toys, players that did not fit the mold of superstars, that had nonetheless come together, playing with the type of unity and selflessness that belong in a Disney movie.
Listen, that Pistons team, that defense was incredible. That defense was incredible. But yeah, Lakers should have won that series, man. I'm still haunted by that series.
Only Ben Wallace was an All-NBA selection, and he was a second-teamer at that. A lot of people lost a lot of money when the Detroit Pistons won the 2004 NBA championship. And make no mistake, the Pistons didn't just get lucky. They smoked the Lakers in 5 games. It's one of the great upsets of all time.
Yeah.
Right up there with the 2011 Mavs and the 77 Blazers. As time has gone on, the 04 Lakers have become something of a parable. Something that warns against the dangers of ego, selfishness, divisiveness, a lack of chemistry, and star power thoughtlessly tossed together.
To be fair, Karl Malone and Gary Payton were damn near fossils at that point. Now, Gary Payton would move on to win a championship with the Miami Heat later. Karl never won one. I'm pretty sure Karl Malone retired after that season, but their careers were over. So this wasn't some super team full of players in their prime. Shaq and Kobe. Shaq was still performing well, but starting to get over that hill a little bit. Kobe still in his athletic prime, but as a player still hadn't quite reached his prime. He was almost there.
In the following days, the Shaq and Kobe dynasty fell to bits. The castle had crumbled, and there was no putting it back together. Shaq had finally had enough and demanded a trade, landing on the Miami Heat. Gary Payton was traded to the Celtics. Karl Malone never played again. Point guard Derek Fisher left for the Golden State Warriors. And Phil Jackson retired after allegedly telling Lakers brass that he would not return if Kobe was still on the roster. Which just left Kobe. At this point, he may well have been the most reviled athlete in America. He had run Shaq, the best player on their 3 championship teams, out of town, driven the great Phil Jackson into retirement, and was still being accused of a heinous crime. And the cherry on top, not that there really needed to be one, was the fact that Kobe Bryant played horrifically in the finals. He'd put up 22 points a night, but on just 38% shooting from the field, 17% from 3, and with over 3.5 turnovers per game. He'd finally gotten what he'd always wanted. He was the alpha dog, the leader of the team, but only because he was the last man standing. And that's kind of what he evolved into. A cowboy, a gunslinger, the last man standing. He dropped a lot of his commercially appropriate image and just said fuck it. He had no one left but the person he trusted the most in the world. Himself. During Kobe's first season as a solo artist, Phil released a book titled The Last Season, going into detail about the drama of the Lakers, and particularly the shortcomings of the uncoachable Kobe Bryant. Kobe in turn revealed that he had created an alternate identity for himself. The Black Mamba, a creature that, as Bryant described, can strike with 99% accuracy at maximum speed in rapid succession. Aside from the fact that he gave himself a nickname, the Black Mamba title seemed extra comical after Kobe shot 43% on the year and the Lakers finished with their worst record in over a decade, missing the playoffs for just the 5th time in franchise history.
So he's not going to mention this here, but Kobe Bryant had a season-ending injury that season. Shortly after the All-Star break, the Lakers were actually in playoff contention. Kobe had a season-ending injury. I'm pretty sure he had to get surgery. And after Kobe went out is when the Lakers really plummeted in the standings. Nobody ever brings that up. They just say, he missed the playoffs his first year without Shaq. I will put context on anybody, not just Kobe, because it's my favorite player. I keep it fair and functional with every player I talk about, even if I don't like the player. But no one ever mentions that he had a season-ending injury, and that's why the Lakers fell out of the standings. No one ever mentions that. Let's continue. A legitimate injury and a legitimate excuse as to why he missed the playoffs his first year without Shaq.
It was the first time that Kobe had been able to be the undisputed best player of the team, to put that team on his back and take full credit for the wins and full blame for the losses. And the Lakers stunk out loud. Which brings us to Kobe's 2006 season.
Prime Kobe.
Easily one of the strangest individual seasons a player has had in the last 30 years. The weirdness started early, with a return to the sideline for none other than Phil Jackson. That's right, just 1 year after roasting Kobe as a player, and to some extent as a person, Phil took up the reins and again became the head coach of the Los Angeles Lakers. The results that first year were somewhat mixed. The team finished with a 45-37 record and qualified for the playoffs, but it's the way they got there that remains noteworthy. Despite the results of the year prior, and despite Phil's guidance in the triangle offense, Kobe doubled down. Hell, he tripled down on his warpath. He still wouldn't cede anything to a player he thought wasn't working hard enough. After all, why give the ball to someone who isn't as good and who doesn't work as hard?
Put this in the context. Again, how this story actually went is that coming into that season, Kobe and Phil were the only ones that knew the triangle offense. Phil handpicked a lot of the players, Kwame Brown, Smush Parkers, who was that? The Brian Cook, Chris Mem, those guys. And he's like, hey, Phil sat Kobe down. He said, hey, it's going to take a while before we can get these guys up to speed on the triangle offense. So until then, I am going to need you to take on more of an offensive workload and be more aggressive scoring. And then as they start to learn the offense, we're going to pull back on the reins later in the season. That actually happened. Put that in the context as well. That was a conversation between Phil and Kobe.
Kobe bet on himself and became a one-man army the likes of which had not been seen since the early days of Michael Jordan. I'm talking 35 points per game for the entire season, becoming just the 5th player to ever top 35 a night. I'm talking about a scoring average of 43.4 points for the entire month of January, the highest ever for a player that isn't Wilt Chamberlain. That season saw the legions of Kobe Bryant fans start to say to the world, look at this. This is our guy. He gives it all every night and he does everything.
I'd also like to add that is arguably the greatest offensive season considering the average amount of points teams was scoring back then, which was like in the high 90s. I would also like to add that at one point in that season, before Phil Jackson told Kobe, let's pull the reins back as we approach the playoffs and they're learning the triangle offense, he was averaging I think at one point 37 points per game before he started scaling back, and then his average dropped to 35.
He works his ass off, believes in himself over everything, and is unafraid of anything. Meanwhile, the rest of the basketball world entrenched itself into a totally different camp. They took up the banner that said that Kobe Bryant was a narcissistic ball hog who froze out his teammates and lacked the awareness or selflessness to include his teammates in all the ways that are necessary for winning. Nothing provided ammo for those two camps like his 2 most famous performances of the year, perhaps 2 of the most famous performances of his career. In the first, Kobe Bryant scored 62 points in just the first 3 quarters against the Dallas Mavericks. As a team through 3 quarters, the Mavs had scored 61 points. Yeah, Kobe had outscored the entire Mavs team by himself. Insane.
I think that's the better
just
game.
Just a few weeks later, the Black Mamba submitted the 2nd greatest scoring effort in NBA history. On January 22nd, 2006, in a home game against the Toronto Raptors, Kobe Bryant scored 81 points. And make no mistake, this was not something that he did just for his ego or just to set a record. The Lakers needed it from him. After a somehow pedestrian 26-point first half from Bryant, the Raptors still held a 14-point halftime lead. In the second half, through sheer will, focus, and talent, Kobe kept the Lakers in the game, nailing shot after shot after shot until they took the lead and eventually walked out of the building with a win. But of course, his detractors will point out the fact that he finished the night with just 2 assists. That was the kind of year Kobe Bryant had.
What about the 6
He
steals?
finished 4th in MVP voting, but had the second most first place votes. It was the first year where you either loved Kobe Bryant or you hated Kobe Bryant, with no in between. And the weirdest thing of that season still hadn't even happened. In the first round of the playoffs, the Lakers matched up against the Phoenix Suns and the winner of the MVP award, Steve Nash. The Lakers took a 3-1 lead through the first 4 games of the series, with Kobe emphatically sealing a Game 4 win with not 1, but 2 all-time clutch plays. And then, the Lakers blew it. The series went down to a 7th game, where Kobe had the most perplexing game of his career. A productive 23-point first half, followed by a 1-point second half. Kobe Bryant took just 3 shots in the second half of the most important game of the season, in the midst of one of the great individual seasons ever. The same Kobe Bryant that scored 81 points in a game checked out and refused to shoot for whatever reason in what ended up being a 31-point loss. He was called stupid and selfish by none other than the Los Angeles Times. And just to...
You know, it's funny. You're in a lose-lose situation. You don't win. You keep shooting. He was on pace for 50 again. He had just had 50 the game before. And they lost because they couldn't get a rebound. I'm not even going to talk about that. So he continues to shoot, gets another 50 points. The Lakers lose. All right, he's selfish. He shot his team out the game. He doesn't shoot. He's passive, and you're still selfish, and you lost again. You don't win in that situation. Not just Kobe, other players in that situation. You just can't win. If you don't win the game, you just don't win, no matter what you do. But I'm not going to get into my opinion on what happened this game, because I'm actually going to put out a YouTube video where I talk about that entire Game 7 and leading up to it. And Kobe actually opened up about that game on TNT with Chuck and the crew. So I'm going to save my commentary for that video.
Pour salt in the wound, do you know who won the championship in 2006? The Miami Heat, led by a thrilling young shooting guard named Dwayne Wade.
Oh, yeah.
And his partner in crime, Shaquille O'Neal. It does not get weirder than that.
Yeah.
After the season, Bryant decided to make a change. Whether it was to rehab his public image, to signal a change in personality, or just because he wanted to, Kobe Bryant changed his number before the 2006-2007 season from 8 to 24. For all the things that he had done wearing number 8. The three-peat, the drama, the scoring records, everything. It was the things he did wearing number 24 that cement Kobe Bryant as a legend.
So I think I've made all the comments I wanted to say throughout the course of the video, so I'm not going to really have much to say as far as closing remarks and an outro. But yeah, this was generally a well done documentary. I had to shed light on some things that he did not mention to add some context to the commentary that he was saying. No question about it. And I'm just trying to look at it from the entire scope. But yeah, very nicely done. Very nicely done. I usually don't watch a lot of Kobe documentaries because they're usually very, what's the word I want to use? They're really surface level. They're really surface level, and they usually just pull from popular mainstream narratives, but don't really tell the truth or the whole truths, and usually have, misinformation. So that's what I find with a lot of Kobe documentaries that I've seen. And it's hard to make a 1 hour documentary on a player that had a 20-year career, right? How do you fit everything in appropriately? So I do take that into consideration. One thing I do like about the Last Dance documentary is that it's a long documentary spanning several episodes, so everything can be talked about appropriately. But nicely done, and I can't wait to dig into part 2. Let me know what you think about this. Do you love Kobe? Do you hate Kobe? Are you indifferent to Kobe? Does listening to my commentary and watching these videos, has it changed your perception on Kobe by maybe having information that you didn't know, or maybe having a change of heart from what you thought about him previously? I would love to hear your opinion. Like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell, stay notified, and I'll catch you on the next one. We out, baby.